The office was quiet that night, the kind of quiet where you can hear the faint buzz of the overhead lights and the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock. Most people had already gone home. Their desks sat in darkness, chairs tucked neatly in, leaving only the glow of our two lamps cutting soft circles into the late evening air. I was sitting in my desk, typing half-heartedly, but my attention kept drifting, not toward my work, but toward her. She sat across the room, shoulders squared, eyes fixed on a spreadsheet like she was carrying the weight of the entire company on her back. My boss, always so composed, so sharp. Tonight, though, there was something different about her. A looseness in the way she leaned back in her chair, one hand absently brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. It should have been nothing, just a small, ordinary gesture. But for some reason, it lingered in my chest. The silence stretched until she broke it, her voice warm and low. "Still here? You don't have to stay as late as I do, you know." I smiled faintly, pretending to glance at my screen. Maybe I just like the peace when everyone else is gone. She gave a soft laugh, the kind that wasn't forced, just naturally slipping out, and for a moment, the room felt different. Lighter, warmer. I watched her rub her temples, the faintest sigh escaping before she caught herself. Even in that moment of fatigue, she carried herself with grace, the kind of presence that filled a room without needing to say a word. "Long week?" I asked, careful not to sound too curious. "You could say that." She leaned forward, resting her chin lightly against her hand. "Sometimes I wonder if the work ever really ends, or if it just waits for us to catch up." Her words carried more weight than she probably meant to share, but I held on to them. There was something quietly human in her tone, something I hadn't heard from her during the day when she stood at the head of meetings, commanding the room. For a while, we just sat in the stillness together. The hum of the computer, the occasional shuffle of papers, the faint patter of rain beginning against the windows. And then it happened, so small, so unintentional. She leaned past me to grab a file from the shared cabinet, her sleeve brushing against mine. Barely a touch, yet it left a trail of heat on my skin, a reminder that she was close, closer than she should be. I caught the faint trace of her perfume, subtle, elegant, like fresh flowers after rain. My breath hitched before I could stop it, and I forced myself to look back at my work. But I knew something had shifted in that moment. A laugh that lingered too long, a glance that carried too much, a touch that shouldn't have mattered but did. The office was the same. The night was the same. But she wasn't just my boss anymore. She was a woman I was beginning to notice in ways I shouldn't. And no matter how hard I tried to push the thought away, it was already there, waiting. The rain had picked up outside, tapping steadily against the tall office windows. Most of the building was in darkness by then, but our corners still glowed under the soft lamplight. She was bent over a stack of papers, glasses perched on her nose, the faintest crease in her brow as she read. I told myself to focus on my own work, but my eyes betrayed me, drifting toward her. There was something magnetic about the way she carried herself, precise, confident. Yet, in these rare late hours, she seemed softer, almost approachable. "Hungry?" she asked suddenly, her voice cutting through the quiet. I blinked, caught off guard. She tilted her head toward the clock. It was almost 9. "I was thinking of ordering something in," she continued, but then hesitated, chewing lightly on her lower lip. "But maybe that's not." She stopped herself, shaking her head as though the thought was too personal, too unprofessional. I smiled, trying to make it easier for her. "Food sounds good. Just nothing with too much spice, or I'll regret it tomorrow." Her laugh was small but genuine. Noted. Minutes later, takeout containers arrived, filling the office with a warm scent of noodles and stir-fried vegetables. We sat across from each other, no longer boss and employee in that moment, just two people sharing dinner in the half-empty silence of a late-night office. She surprised me by steering the conversation away from deadlines and reports. Instead, she asked, What kind of music do you usually listen to when you're working? Mostly old acoustic stuff, I admitted. Calms me down. And you? She leaned back slightly, chopsticks poised midair. Classical. Always has been. I guess it makes me feel like there's order in the chaos. The way she said it, not just as a preference, but as a confession, made me wonder how much of her life was about holding everything together for everyone else. We drifted into safer, lighter topics, books, travel, little regrets about paths not taken. But with every exchange, the space between us seemed to shrink. At one point, she reached for a folder on the desk, and I reached at the same time. Our fingers brushed, just a fleeting contact, skin against skin, but it sent a quiet jolt through me. She pulled back quickly, clearing her throat, her composure cracking for just a second. "Sorry," she murmured. "Don't be," I replied, too softly, the words almost lost in the hum of the lights. For a moment after that, neither of us spoke. She tapped her chopsticks gently against the edge of the carton, eyes down, like she was reminding herself of the rules we weren't supposed to cross. I sat frozen, acutely aware of how close we were sitting, of the warmth that seemed to fill the air between us. They were just small things, shared food, a brush of hands, laughter that lingered too long, but they felt like lines invisible and fragile, lines that we both knew shouldn't blur. And yet, slowly, inevitably, they were beginning to. The hours stretched on, the kind of late-night rhythm where time no longer feels measured by minutes, but by the steady hum of machines and the faint tap of keys. We had finished our food, the empty carton stacked neatly to one side. She leaned back in her chair, sighing quietly as though the weight of the entire day was pressing down at once. "You should get some rest," I said gently. "You've been here longer than anyone." Her lips curved in a half-smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Rest isn't something people in my position get to enjoy very often. I hesitated. Normally, I would have left the comment alone. She was my boss, after all, always poised, always collected. But there was something in the way her voice thinned on that last word that made me pause. "What do you mean?" I asked. She looked at me for a long moment, as if weighing whether she should answer. Finally, she exhaled, resting her elbow on the desk and her chin against her palm. "When you're the one people look to for direction, you don't get to admit you're tired. You don't get to say you're lonely. You just keep going, because if you don't, the whole structure cracks." Her words caught me off guard. She had always seemed untouchable, a woman who could walk into any room and command it. But here she was, confessing quietly that behind that strength was something fragile, something human. I leaned forward, my voice low. "That sounds heavy, to carry it all alone." Her eyes flickered toward me, studying my face as though she was trying to see if I truly meant it. For the first time, I noticed how tired they looked. Not dull, but tired in the way of someone who had fought battles no one else could see. There was a silence between us, softer now, not awkward, but intimate. She broke it with a quiet laugh, shaking her head. "I don't know why I'm telling you this. Maybe because I'm actually listening," I said before I could stop myself. Her gaze softened, and then, in a gesture so simple yet so earth-shaking, she reached across the desk and laid her hand lightly on my arm. Not long, not forceful, just enough for me to feel the warmth of her skin through the fabric of my sleeve. It was grounding, steady, and yet it sent a tremor through me when I had to fight to keep from showing on my face. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice quieter now. I nodded, swallowing against the sudden dryness in my throat. "Anytime." The moment passed, her hand slipping back, the professional mask slowly returning to her features. But I knew what I had seen, a glimpse behind the wall she built so carefully. And even if she never intended it, that brief touch, that fleeting honesty, had changed something between us. Because now I wasn't just seeing her as my boss. I was seeing her as a woman, one who carried too much, gave too much, And for one fragile moment, let me be close enough to feel the weight she hid from everyone else. By the time midnight crept in, the office felt more like a sanctuary than a workplace. Outside, the storm had gathered its full strength. Rain lashed against the wide glass panes, thunder rolling through the sky with a force that made the windows tremble. She stood by the glass wall, arms folded as she stared out at the storm. The light from the city was blurred by the rain, turning the world outside into a swirl of gray and silver. "Looks like we're trapped for a while," she said softly, her voice almost lost beneath the crack of thunder. I joined her at the window, keeping a respectful distance, though every part of me wanted to step closer. "Could be worse places to be stuck," I offered, trying to sound casual. She glanced at me, a quick flicker of amusement crossing her features, but her eyes didn't linger. Instead, she turned back to the storm. Her reflection in the glass looked almost fragile, the strong lines of her posture softened by the dim light. When the lights flickered suddenly, she startled. It was only for a second, but instinctively she moved nearer, her shoulder brushing mine. It was the smallest of touches, but in that moment, it felt like the air itself shifted. My breath caught, though I forced myself to remain still, as if moving might break the spell. She stayed close, perhaps without realizing, perhaps on purpose. The storm outside seemed to draw us into the same space, a shared pocket of warmth against the chaos. "This," she began, her voice low, almost swallowed by the rain. She hesitated, her gaze fixed on the patterns of water streaming down the glass. "Whatever this is, it can't happen." Her words landed heavily, a quiet barrier laid down between us. Yet her tone wasn't sharp, not the clipped authority of a boss drawing a line. It was softer, more fragile, like someone trying to convince herself. I wanted to answer, to tell her I understood, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I watched her hand as it tightened slightly against her arm, the faint tremor in her fingers betraying the calm she tried to maintain. The silence stretched, filled only by the storm. I shifted slightly, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her, but careful not to cross the space she had just defined. Finally, she exhaled a long, quiet breath. "You don't know how dangerous it is. For me. For you. It doesn't matter what we feel. People don't forgive these kinds of mistakes." I swallowed, my chest tight. The truth was, she was right. And yet, the pull between us was undeniable, more real in that quiet moment than anything I could explain. The thunder rumbled again, and though neither of us moved, the brush of her shoulder against mine lingered like a secret neither of us wanted to name. And I realized then, this wasn't just a passing thought or a fleeting attraction. This was a line we were already standing on, one we could never fully step back from. The storm eased sometime after midnight, the heavy drumming of rain softening to a gentler rhythm. Yet inside the office, the silence between us was heavier than thunder had ever been. She had retreated back to her desk, papers spread before her, though I could tell she wasn't really reading. Her posture was perfect, her face calm, but I could see the truth in the way her fingers stilled too long on the page, the way her eyes lingered in one place as though afraid to meet mine. I sat across from her, the words building in my chest like pressure that wouldn't release. I knew I shouldn't speak. I should respect her boundary, let the night pass, pretend nothing had shifted. But the thought of leaving things unsaid felt unbearable. Finally, I broke the silence. "I don't see you as just my boss." Her head lifted, sharply at first, then more slowly as her eyes found mine. There's a flicker of something, warning, surprise, fear, maybe all of them at once. I forced myself to hold her gaze. "I see you. Not the title, not the authority, just you." The words hung between us, dangerous and unsteady. I half expected her to shut me down, to remind me of the rules, the risks, the impossible line we were already towing. Instead, she turned her chair slightly, her back half-angled away from me. Her arms folded tightly across her chest, a shield she rarely needed but now held with quiet desperation. "This isn't a game," she said, her voice firm, though it wavered at the edges. "You don't understand what's at stake. My position, my reputation, everything I've worked for could disappear if anyone even suspected." Her voice broke, the words catching as she struggled to hold them steady. She pressed her lips together, her eyes shining faintly in the low light. I stood, slowly, crossing the space between us. My hand hovered above her shoulder, close enough that I could feel the faint warmth of her presence, but I didn't dare touch her. "I know," I said softly. "I know it could cost everything. But what about what it would give?" She turned then, finally looking at me. Her eyes were filled with a storm of their own. Fear, yes, but also longing she could no longer hide. For a moment, the mask slipped, and I saw her fully. "This could cost my career," she whispered, as if speaking it aloud made it more real, more irreversible. The words struck deep, but I didn't pull away. My voice was quiet, steady, carrying all the truth I had been holding back. And when my heart, her breath caught, she looked away quickly, pressing a hand to her forehead like she needed to steady herself. Yet she didn't ask me to leave, didn't order me back to my desk. The silence that followed was trembling, fragile, and alive. We were standing at the edge of something neither of us had planned for, something that terrified her and consumed me. And for the first time, I wondered if the risk wasn't what might destroy us, but what we'd lose if we walked away. The storm outside had quieted to little more than a whisper against the glass. Inside, though, the air felt charged, alive with everything left unsaid. She sat at her desk, one hand covering her eyes, as though trying to shut out the weight of what had just passed between us. I stood there, motionless, my words still echoing in the silence. And when my heart, I hadn't planned to say it, hadn't even realized the truth of it until the moment the words left me. Now, they hung between us like fragile glass, too delicate to touch, too important to ignore. Slowly, she lowered her hand and looked at me. Her expression was torn, caught between duty and desire. Her eyes shimmered faintly in the lamplight, and in them I saw not just authority or strength, but the quiet ache of someone who had carried her battles alone for too long. "You don't know what you're saying," she whispered, her voice soft, almost pleading. "I do," I replied, stepping closer but careful, deliberate, as though any sudden move might send her retreating back into the safety of walls I couldn't breach. "I know exactly what I'm saying. I've never been more certain of anything." She shook her head, almost imperceptibly, her lips pressed into a line. "This isn't fair. To you. To me. If anyone knew." Her voice faltered, the words dissolving into the quiet. I could see the conflict written in every small detail, the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers gripped the edge of the desk, as though she needed something solid to hold on to. I moved closer still, until I stood just beside her. I didn't touch her. Not yet. Instead, I let my hand hover over the desk, inches from hers. The space between our fingers was electric, a silent invitation she could either accept or refuse. Her breathing slowed, deepened. She closed her eyes for a moment, as if searching for strength in the darkness behind her lids. And then, with a quiet exhale, she let her hand slide across the wood until it brushed against mine. It was tentative at first, the faintest touch, her skin warm, trembling. But when I didn't pull away, when I let my fingers gently curve to meet hers, she didn't retreat. She held on. The world seemed to narrow in that moment. No office, no storm, no rules, just the soft press of her hand in mine, the fragile surrender of someone who had fought against herself for too long. Her eyes opened, meeting mine with a vulnerability that took my breath away. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted quietly. "Neither do I," I whispered back. But we don't have to figure it all out tonight. Just don't let go. She gave the faintest nod, her hand tightening slightly around mine. It wasn't reckless. It wasn't impulsive. It was certain. For the first time, she wasn't my boss, and I wasn't her employee. We were simply two people standing on the edge of something terrifying and beautiful, and choosing, finally, to step toward it. By the time the storm outside had passed, the office felt suspended in its own kind of stillness. The rain had slowed to a faint drizzle, tapping lightly against the glass, and beyond it the sky was beginning to pale, hints of dawn brushing the horizon. Neither of us had moved much. We sat together now, side by side on the long leather bench by the window, not as boss and employee, not as roles weighed down by titles, but as two people quietly clinging to a fragile moment. Her head rested lightly against my shoulder, the faint pressure grounding me in a way I never expected. I could feel the warmth of her cheek through the thin fabric of my shirt, the steadiness of her breathing gradually slowing as though, for once, she had allowed herself to stop carrying everything alone. I didn't dare move. I didn't dare break whatever fragile spell had let her lean into me. Instead, I let myself memorize it. The subtle scent of her perfume, the faint brush of her hair against my jaw when she shifted slightly, the way her fingers lingered near mine as if they wanted to entwine but weren't ready just yet. "You realize," she murmured after a long silence, her voice hushed but steady, "that nothing about this is simple." I tilted my head slightly toward her, careful not to disturb her rest. "I know." She drew in a quiet breath, her shoulders rising against me before falling again. "People talk. They always do. And when they do, they'll judge me more than you. They'll say things they can't take back." Her words were heavy, but I could hear the shift in them. They weren't words of rejection anymore. They were words of fear, of someone trying to measure the cost of something she already wanted. I let my hands slide carefully, slowly, until my fingers brushed hers. This time, she didn't hesitate. She laced them with mine, her grip gentle but certain. "Then let them talk," I whispered, "because what they say won't change what I feel. And it won't change this." She turned her head slightly, her eyes lifting to meet mine. The first rays of morning light spilled across her face, softening her features, making her look less like the untouchable woman I had admired from afar, and more like the person she truly was, strong, yes, but human, vulnerable, and quietly brave. For the first time, she smiled. Not the polite, professional smile I had seen so often in boardrooms, but something warmer, deeper. A smile that belonged only to me in that moment. "You make it sound so easy," she said softly. "It's not," I admitted, "but some things are worth the risk." She studied me for a moment longer, then leaned her forehead lightly against mine, her touch tender and unhurried. It wasn't a promise of perfection. It wasn't an escape from consequence. It was simply her choosing me, and me choosing her. Outside, the city was waking, cars beginning to stir on the streets below. But inside, in the hush of morning light, it felt like a beginning. A fragile, uncertain, breathtaking beginning. And as she squeezed my hand gently in hers, I knew, whatever came next, we wouldn't face it apart.